Hello everyone and welcome to the Unanswered Questions True Crime Podcast.
I have spent hours and hours investigating this.
He basically told her that people have been killed. Journalists, independent investigators, people like that disappeared. It frightened her to the bone.
There's more to the story than meets the eye.
There were rumors of torture and homicide and sexual abuse, all sorts of egregious, horrendous crimes.
He was polygraphed 3 times. Each of those 3 showed evasions.
His resumes were a skeleton of truth.
He was mad at the world, and particularly mad at the government.
The study that he commissioned described a fictional terrorist attack.
If people have died over this, means you're getting close to the truth.
You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to say, what the fuck?
The party starts when you get on them flights and you just start drinking. But that night, it was too much.
When you have an open bar and you're sitting there for 7 hours, of course these things are going to happen.
Naked men with robes, guys passing out, drinking, busting each other open, cutting ponytails off. Sounds like hell to me.
Like, I just knew, okay, the boys are being boys and I'm not going back there at all.
I remember thinking, like, is somebody gonna say that this has gone too far?
The talent was just crazy. I mean, they were great guys, don't get me wrong.
They act like asses. Children. I think people have no idea what really goes on sometimes, especially back then in pro wrestling. And this is just like a capsule of what pro wrestling was like in that era.
It was just a normal occurrence for a crazy bunch of wrestlers on a plane. Seems like a crazy story to probably everyone who is watching this outside of professional wrestlers.
If I never talked about the plane ride from hell again in my life, I would be very happy.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of my new podcast, Unanswered Questions, where every week we will endeavour to discuss a mysterious unsolved case that has many lingering unanswered questions. So I hope you enjoy, and as always, leave me some feedback on what you think about the show and rate it as well. Now on to the show. This week we'll be talking about the infamous WWE plane ride from hell.
It's what you remember from the ride.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. The plane ride from hell, I've been on worse fucking commercial flights than that.
Really?
But this was pre 9/11 days when you could get away with a lot more shit. I mean, I seen fucking guys get their shoelaces lit on fire and crazy shit, man. But yeah, no, the plane ride from hell. Everybody had their little fucking different little deals they were doing, and some people were doing GHB and you know.
What started it? What was the event you would say that precipitated that attitude?
It was just brewing, man. It was fucking brewing. Guys were getting, like I said, getting G'd up and fucking pilled up and whatever, guys. I mean, you know, guys were doing their thing. And Curt Hennig was always very competitive, you know, and he knew, you know, him and Brock, we all were like we all hung out because we all lived in Minnesota. But you know, Curt and fucking Brock got the tussling and went into the emergency door, which obviously, like, they made a huge deal out of it. And the fucking door, it's impossible for it to open in that altitude. So it was really stupid to even make it. It was okay when Vince and fucking Kurt Angle, like the flight before that, fucking had a takedown tournament in the aisle, but like as soon as it happened with them, they made a huge deal out of it. Then fucking Flair comes out in his robe, fucking balls naked with his fucking robe on, strutting down the aisleway. JBL and oh yeah, no. First, Michael Hayes, he almost pissed on Linda McMahon in the fucking. He was like all fucked up, and he's going, and he's like this, and he's like trying to whip his dick out, like piss on. He don't know it's Lindy. He thinks he's at the fucking bathroom. And he's like, wait a minute, and he just keeps saying, wait a minute, over and over again. Finally, somebody got him.
Did she ever see what was?
I can't imagine her not. I mean, I'm not the only one that can verify this fucking story. So.
What was his gimmick? Booze?
I can't say what his gimmick necessarily
To be
was.
that out of it that you don't recognize
Probably
the boss's
he was doing
wife?
the same thing a lot of us, the rest
Jesus.
of us were. We were
Probably.
drinking that GHB. Well, it was a natural. You could buy it in this health food store. This yellow precursor to GHB, like that was. I mean, it was legal, so that was the reason why everybody was doing it, you know. But it fucked you up, and so apparently, the story goes that he did something. I had a match with Bradshaw, and in England for the pay-per-view, and he got some color. So he had this big old fucking gaff mark on his head. And Michael Hayes, you know, the Freebird and Abe's thing, where they always go like that, he was like, boom, he fucking named Bradshaw really hard. And the story goes that Bradshaw fucking clocked him and knocked him out. I didn't see that part, but it sounds good.
On the plane ride?
Yeah.
Okay.
So as he's out cold, I'm like, I knew he had been fucking burying me in the booking meetings, and I'd had it out with him several times in front of people because I resented the fact that he was volunteering Edge and Christian and Matt Hardy and Jeff Hardy to do these fucking ridiculous fucking stunts on these TLC matches on Raw. Man, they were putting those fucking guys on Raw every night doing those things for a while. And I'm like, I hear him going, yeah, it'd be great if right there and da-da-da-da. Michael's good at his job, but he's getting a little overzealous fucking volunteering guys that fall 20 fucking 5 feet, man. And I'm like, why don't you fucking do it? You know, before you start fucking... And I said, why don't you let these guys come up with their own fucking match? How the fuck are they ever going to learn how to do anything if you're fucking dictating what they should do? And you're not even telling them why. You know? You're not telling them why they should do it that way. You're just telling them to do it that way. And that's how you keep people dependent on you, because you don't fucking teach them why. So they got to keep coming to you to ask them what the... That's kind of like the Flair fucking Sting and Flair Lex thing. Lex and Sting always had great matches with Flair because he always told them what to do, but he never told them why.
So you said this to him. You said this to
God, yeah.
Hayes. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, so I'm like, oh, God. He's got that fucking thing in a fucking ponytail, that mullet. You know, he was still rocking the mullet, you know.
Yeah. Still pretty much is.
And I'm like, somebody gave me a pair of scissors. And I remember Lawler over there just giggling. And he's like, oh, fucking Hayes put the screws to, like, Brian, you know, Lawler's son, and he knew it. And everybody's like, no, you're not going to do it. You're not going to do it. And I fucking grabbed them scissors like I was pulling a fucking pair of taped brass knucks out of my fucking tights, you know? And I was like this with the scissors, and everybody's looking. They don't think I'm going to do it. And I grabbed that fucking tail, and I lifted it up like that, and I just went whack. And the whole crowd, the fucking old plane just erupted like, yeah. And then I posted it on the wall at TV the next day, auctioned it off.
There?
Yeah.
On May 5th of 2002, a number of WWE wrestlers and management members flew from Great Britain to the United States following the end of a European tour, which concluded with a British pay-per-view event at Insurrection 2002. The 2002 Insurrection was the third annual Insurrection professional wrestling pay-per-view event produced by the American promotion World Wrestling Federation, WWF, now WWE. It was held exclusively for wrestlers from the promotion's Raw brand division, which made it the promotion's first ever Raw exclusive pay-per-view. The event took place on the 4th of May 2002 at the Wembley Arena in London, England, and was broadcast exclusively in the United Kingdom. This event was the last live televised event to run under the WWF name due to a lawsuit by the World Wildlife Fund over the WWF initialism. The promotion quietly changed its name to World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE, over the next 2 days. The company officially began to use the WWE name beginning with the May 6, 2002 episode of Raw. Thus, it was the last WWF pay-per-view of the Attitude Era. This was also the company's last pay-per-view to be held in London until Money in the Bank in 2023. In addition, a series of notorious incidents occurred on the return flight to the United States, which has been referred to as the plane ride from hell. Wrestlers Scott Hall and Curt Hennig were fired following the event for their involvement in the incidents, while Goldust and Ric Flair were also reprimanded by the company for their involvement in other incidents during the flight, which I'm about to get into.
Well, I've heard the old saying, I've seen Ringling Brothers Circus, I've seen numerous WrestleManias, and I've seen a lot of things, but I've never seen anything like the plane ride from hell. It was crazy. It was, and the truth of the matter is, well, I probably, in my mind, I believe that I was probably the only completely sober person on this plane ride, because this was the first time that I can remember, and I think it would have become a regular thing had it not all of these incidents took place. But I think the first time that I can remember that we had a charter flight with nobody on the flight except the wrestlers and the WWE people, and a fully staffed flight attendants. All of this stuff, just it was a big nice plane, just like the NFL team would take or something like that. And just so many things went wrong, and so many things happened that shouldn't have happened. I do know that it was, I remember that was the last time we had a charter flight, and that was such a shame, because man, the charter flight should have been, just a rare good fortune that would happen to you when you went on these overseas trips. I'm sure it would have continued had it not been from the flight from hell. But yeah, it just got out of hand early. You're right. It was a 7-hour flight, and man, as soon as all the guys loaded on there, the drinking commenced, and it didn't take that long for things to start happening left and right. I think the main authority figure on that flight was JR. Yeah. JR at the time was the head of talent relations. So JR was the guy that was in charge of hiring and firing people. Unfortunately, to my best of my recollection, JR was the first one to be under JR was the first one drunk. So yes, I think that just sort and that just sort of. I love JR, and I've seen JR is one of those kind of people that, and there are a lot of people like this. It doesn't take much to get JR feeling good, and so it was early on in the flight that JR lost control. As far as him being the authority figure, everybody realized that, JR was in no condition to be the authority figure, and that's when things started going south. And I think one of the next guys in line that was a good friend of JR's. JR and I remember I got to sit kind of a part of the time up in the first class section. JR was in the first class section, and then Jerry Briscoe. Oh. Jerry Briscoe was there, and now Jerry is like, I don't know. Jerry's not a guy that you rib very much. Jerry's always a pretty serious kind of guy. He always was. But man, when he started feeling good, and the one thing I can remember about Jerry was he was trying to kiss everybody. He was like so happy, and he wanted to come up and hug you and just start kissing you on the cheek. And he was crawling over chairs, trying to hug people and kiss them and everything. He was just wasted, man. But at least he was his reaction or everything once he got under the influence, he was okay. I mean, he was like a fun or happy kind of drunk, right? But then some of the other guys, there were some guys that were depressed. There were some guys that were, once they got too much to drink, they got angry. And one of the scariest moments was, as you mentioned, it was Brock Lesnar and was it Curt Hennig?
Yeah,
who was he?
Curt Hennig.
Yeah, Brock Lesnar and Curt Hennig. Now, Curt is one of those guys, man. Curt always reminded me of Owen Hart in the fact that he was the classic ribber. You could always expect Curt Hennig to kind of pull some kind of prank or joke on you at all times. And I really think that it all started with Curt just kind of making fun of Brock and the amateur wrestling and all of that sort of stuff. But I don't think Curt meant really anything by it, but he really got under Brock's skin. And the next thing you know, I mean, you could look at Brock and see that his whole head and neck just like turned red. He was getting so mad. And all of a sudden, Brock Lesnar jumps up, and I think Curt still thought he was kidding at this point, or maybe Curt was. Maybe he was that mad too, but man, all of a sudden these guys jump up and they're right in each other's face, and everybody's all of a sudden you say, "Whoa, what's going to happen here?" We're flying along at about 35,000 feet on this big jet, and the next thing you know, the Brock Lesnar and Curt Hennig tie up, and I mean they just boom, lunge at each other. They're locked up and they're wrestling around on this plane. And it was, I think that they finally the pilot had to come on and say something like, "Parent." It was almost like you had a bunch of kids in the back seat, and the pilot comes on and said, "Don't make me come back there." But it was. I mean, these guys were fighting into the wall, into the big exit door. Boom! They crashed into the exit door of the plane. I mean, literally, the plane was kind of like rocking around. These guys were in such a physical battle here on the flight. And it did take a word from the pilot to get these guys pretty much pulled apart. But that was probably the scariest thing that happened on the flight. But gosh, so much happened. That to me was almost like life threatening. If these two guys had all of a sudden knocked open an exit door and the plane would all get sucked out. There was some underlying personal feelings there that I didn't really know existed until, like you said, till you realize they're similar backgrounds and all this sort of stuff, and then you add alcohol to the mix and it just exploded. It just got wild, man. Some of the other things that went on were not they were just as entertaining, but in a different way. I mean, some of the stuff was funny. I'll never forget Goldust. Poor Goldust. I think he and his wife were going through a separation, or
Terri Runnels was his ex-wife at the time, so they were split up.
They had already separated. Yes. Split up.
Yeah.
And was Terri on the flight? Because
Terri was on the flight. So the story is that Dustin Runnels was
he was singing to her.
Yeah.
I do remember him. I do remember him. He got like the microphone in the back where the flight attendants would usually and Dustin was sort of in the back of the plane.
Yeah.
And he got the microphone, and then so all of a sudden everybody on the plane is having to listen to a drunk Goldust singing to his ex-wife or his ex-girlfriend or whatever.
What was he singing? Do you know?
I do not remember that, but I remember he had a rotten voice. It was, it was not good singing, right?
Yeah.
So then I think, I don't know if it was JR, but somebody had to go back and then put an end to the singing, and he got real depressed. And he sat down in one of the back seats there, and he started dipping, or I don't know if he was dipping or just had chewing tobacco in his mouth.
Yeah.
But and to me that's like, oh, that's just the grossest thing ever. When somebody dips or chews and they have to have a spit cup and they spit this nasty tobacco juice in the spit cup, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's what Goldust was doing. He sat down, he put a big chew in his mouth, and he's just got his head down. He's just looking down, and it looks like he's going to cry and everything. But he's just going to town chewing this tobacco. But unfortunately, he didn't have a spit cup.
Oh.
Right. And so here's this beautiful plane, millions of dollar plane, and it's carpeted throughout. It's not like, this is a really nice first class plane, not like a regular airliner where you just walk in and it's got, like a indoor outdoor rug on the floor or whatever. This thing had carpet, and that's nice plush carpet on the floor all throughout the plane. And so Dustin is sitting there, or Goldust is sitting in one of these back seats, and he's just using the floor, that nice beautiful carpet, as his spit cup.
Oh no.
Oh yeah. So that was one of so before you know it, you got this big brown dark circle of tobacco spit right in the middle of the carpet on in one of the rows of the seats back there. So that was one of the things that led to, the damage to the plane. I think this all resulted in there was a big lawsuit over this. One of the other guys that's when he gets a drink or two that becomes a lot of fun is, of course, Nature Boy Ric Flair, right?
Woo!
Woo! We first we hear Dustin Runnels trying to sing, and then next we hear woo, woo. Here's Ric Flair strutting up and down the aisle of the plane at one point for all the, I guess is really trying to impress all the flight attendants. And he went and he got he put on one of his beautiful robes, and we'll go on the aisle of the plane now, except the robe was the only thing he had on.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Ooh.
He had taken all his clothes off except for the robe and was strutting up and down the aisle, wooing at the top of his lungs. And then that was another thing that the flight attendants found a little bit offensive, and I think that was included in the lawsuit as well. Another thing was Michael Hayes.
Now, Michael P.S. Hayes is a road agent. He's one of the higher ups in creative. He's always had Vince's ear when it comes to creative decisions and whatnot, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So back then, I guess X-Pac had a problem with Michael P.S. Hayes. He obviously X-Pac is one of the lightweights and of the WWE at the time, and X-Pac was unhappy the way that he was being booked and whatnot. And
see, this goes back to what we were talking about people liking me at one point. It's when you're in that position of power and you're the one of the guys that makes the decision on who or how a wrestler gets pushed or not pushed or used or not used. If he's not used the way he thinks he should be, he blames that person in power, and if he doesn't come up to him personally, he'll always hold a grudge and it'll come out later. And you're right, that's what happened. Michael Hayes, and still to this day, there are a lot of people that don't like him simply because of the fact that they think he didn't think enough of them to use him the way that they wanted to be used, and that's, I guess, what happened. And like in Michael's defense, you don't realize that. You don't know who likes you or not. Everybody pretends they like you to your face because you do have that, you do have that power. But obviously, everybody doesn't like you, but you don't know it. So in the case of Michael Hayes, he's always been, his long blonde hair has been his trademark. I remember I almost got sued. He threatened to sue me and our promotion in Memphis, and just pitched one of the biggest locker room fits I've ever seen in my life over the fact that in a match one night I threw a fireball and he said it burned his hair.
Oh, his glorious hair.
His glorious hair. He came back to the back screaming and threatening to sue, and he said, "This is my trademark, this hair," and he burned a big chunk of my hair out. And so anyway, he thinks a lot of his hair. And at that, on the plane ride, he would always, if he wasn't out on TV or whatever, he would keep it in this long ponytail with put a rubber band around it and just have it hanging down half the way down his back with a ponytail. Well, somehow I think, I don't remember. I think Michael Hayes, I don't remember Michael Hayes being drunk either. I think maybe he didn't on this plane drink too much, or either or maybe he did. But anyway, he went to sleep, which was a big mistake. Big mistake. And I don't know if he was just trying to, if he just went to sleep to try to avoid all the stuff that was going on, just to try to, put in some earbuds or whatever and fall asleep and just be away from all of this craziness. But for one reason or other, Michael Hayes went to sleep, and he's leaning back in a chair, and he's got that long blonde ponytail hanging over the back of the chair, right? Yeah. And he's sound asleep. Mm. And I happened to be, in a seat just right there. I mean, I was walking all up and down the plane too. I had all my clothes on, of course. I was like Rick, but I was just surveying the situation, seeing what was going on here, what was going on in the back, what was going on in the front. But here's Michael Hayes with his ponytail hanging down the back. And I don't know if there was a situation where somebody gave X-Pac or or Sean Waltman. I don't know if somebody like made a dare or made a bet or whatever, or how it was decided that he was going to do it. But I mean, I sort of just walked up as it was happening, and here was X-Pac or Sean Waltman. He has this pair of scissors, and my eyes got big. I can remember just watching him and looking, and he looked up at me, and I've just with my eyes got real big, like, no, you're not going to do that, are you? And then just this like a little evil Dennis the Menace kid-like grin came across his face, and he took hold of Michael Hayes' ponytail, and he snipped it off, the whole thing right at the back of his head. And then he went and hid the hair, right? And so that was, and then it was hours. It was still hours before Michael Hayes woke up or before we got off the plane. But man, oh man, when he woke up and found out that somebody had cut his hair off, it was like the end of the world. I mean, he went ballistic, and nobody was going to snitch. Nobody was going to tell. Nobody would tell. He was threatening to fight everybody. He thought it might have been Jerry Briscoe. I remember him challenging Jerry Briscoe, and Jerry Briscoe, Jerry was a great amateur wrestler. And I remember Michael Hayes saying, "I don't give a damn about your amateur wrestling back. I'll fight you right now if you cut my hair off." And Jerry said, "I didn't cut your hair off." And he was literally going up and trying to see if he could get a confession out of everybody that was on the plane, but nobody cracked. Nobody would tell him who did it. But that was the most irate I believe I've ever seen anybody in the business. Maybe even more irate than the night I set his hair on fire.
Oh, geez.
Because to me, I couldn't even tell that it had damaged his hair. But this time, his hair was gone. I mean, it was gone. And so that got resolved. It never really got resolved. But I don't know, somehow the ponytail showed up the next night at Raw or something, and like pinned to the wall or something. Anyway, that was a big, major, like probably the most memorable thing that happened on the flight. That was one of the old school type ribs, except that it seemed, I mean, that's funny to everybody except who it happens to.
Right.
And that was the kind of stuff. I mean, guys used to fall asleep and they'd shave their eyebrows off or something like that, I mean, and so cutting a lock or some piece of somebody's hair was just like one of the old school ribs that I kind of grew up with people like Jackie Fargo and Tojo Yamamoto. These guys would do extreme ribs like that, and they were funny to everybody except who it actually happened to. Well, I was just remembering one time my son Brian and Big Show had an altercation on a plane, and Brian, to me, he would have probably had to have been under the influence of something, because he was demanding to fight the Big Show, of all things. And Big Show was just sitting in his seat, and Brian was like standing in front of him, like cursing and ranting and raving and just saying, "Get up! I don't care how big you are. I'll fight you right now. Get your ass up!" and all this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, please don't get up, Big Show. Please don't. And I think just to save an embarrassing altercation, Big Show never got up and got out of his seat. But I guess that happened somewhere else. But for some reason, I was thinking that was on that flight too. Jeez. I don't know.
Now, during this flight back to the United States, a series of incidents occurred that has been referred to as the plane ride from hell, which has been described as one of professional wrestling's most infamous scandals. The Boeing 757 plane that was chartered included an open bar, and many of the wrestlers indulged. This led to many incidents, including physical altercations and the sexual harassment of two female flight attendants, Taralyn Cappellano and Heidi Doyle. Sorry if I get those names wrong. Vice's Dark Side of the Rings documentary series covered the incident in September of 2021.
Some of the big names on that trip were certainly Stone Cold Steve Austin. The Undertaker was on the flight. Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Brock Lesnar was on the flight. Ric Flair was on the flight, and many others. So it was stacked.
It's a long flight, and we thought that by chartering a customized jet that we were being as talent friendly as we could. Unfortunately, it didn't it didn't work out well.
My name is Heidi Doyle, and in 2002, I was a flight attendant on the European charter for the WWE. I worked for a company called SportsJet. It was a private airline that flew many of the different sports teams out of the Phoenix area, the Phoenix Suns and the Phoenix Coyotes. We also flew the Utah Jazz and the Mariners. A normal commercial Boeing 757 would have 190 seats, and our flight had 50 leather seats and bigger carpet than I've ever had in my own house. There's couches and lounge areas. It's just not a very bad way to travel. It costs a lot to do it privately, but you also get many benefits. You get to order your own food, you know what you're gonna eat, you know you're all gonna be comfortable. You know that you don't have to deal with anybody of the general public on the airplane. You're just amongst the group that's your people.
It's just nice to know that we're not going to offend anyone. Like sometimes when the boys are on flights and they're a bit obnoxious, it's kind of like you go like, oh gosh, are we gonna, sorry. Hi, I'm Terri Runnels, and I was a passenger on the plane ride from hell.
Goldust along with a woman carrying a cigar.
I remember sitting in the first class section. I think Jim Ross was up there, Linda, and Vince.
The front had a lounge area, so it was kind of like your first class of the first class, I guess, of the airplanes. And generally the coaches and the managers sat up there. And in this case, Vince McMahon and his wife, they were up there, and then the wrestlers were in the back. So I was in the back with the majority of the wrestlers. My responsibility in the very back was getting them the drinks, getting the meals out to them. They were hungry. They wanted to try all the different meals that were on the airplane. Ric Flair had talked to all of us a lot. He was very chatty, and he was kind of like the captain of the team, I would say. He had that kind of feel, and he was very, very nice and personable to us. He was a little flirty, I think. 99% of the time we had men. That's who we were working with. You just had to be aware of getting too comfortable, I think, because that can always just create a situation that different people can have different thoughts of the level of comfortableness. But on the flight to Europe, there's no problems. Everyone took their seats, and we taxied out onto the tarmac. And we got advised that we were on a weather hold from Connecticut. When we were told it was a weather delay, I bet we probably all thought maybe 20 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour tops.
Well, we were delayed for 7 hours before the plane takes off.
So we sat on the tarmac for a little while. Commercial airlines, you would all be familiar with the small little mini bottles so we had just normal bottles. And the liquor cart ran out of alcohol. And another liquor cart was ordered at their request. And that was also drank until that liquor cart ran out. And then a third one was ordered.
And how common is it to go through a cart before a plane takes off?
I've never ever done it, ever before, and never again. Never, and we went through 3.
Imagine your varsity football team. They've just won a game, except they can't get out of the parking lot. And there's cases and cases of beer. That's what it's like. A bunch of high school guys.
To say it's high school is really like giving it too much. It's more like 5th grade.
Even though it was their plane in a sense, we served the drinks still. But that became not the case. They started to serve themselves the drinks, and they didn't want our help. I was very concerned about the carts being replenished on the ground.
If they were to try to cut us off, we would have gotten to that booze. Somebody would have. Flair probably could have thrown a couple $1,000s at him and said, "Here, take this. We're gonna get that liquor." We would have got the liquor. Absolutely.
I think the relief that they're finally going home was cause for celebration. And they only got a small window now to really let their hair down and become stupid. And that's what a lot of them chose to do.
I don't remember how long we'd been up in the air before. It was very, very evident that we had a lot of drunk people.
Oh, shoot, the boys could get drunk in 1 hour. When you're doing GHB or pills or anything like that, Percocets or Vicodins and stuff that were around, you could do a lot of damage, period, in 1 hour.
But it was always booze and pills in the WWE because we had doctor's prescriptions, and as long as you had a doctor's prescription, it was okay. Of course, it wasn't because, we'd have doctors write us whatever we wanted.
halcyons, GHB, Placidil. No, the Placidils I think were in the early 90s. But I know there was some GHB and halcyons on the flight. Halcyons were some things that we took sometimes just to go to sleep for a long period of time. And sometimes you use them for a rib too.
Way back in the day, it used to be called H-bombing, and it was halcyons. And I've seen so many guys dropping these H-bombs in the drinks in order to get the mark to pass out. They shave his head, they, whatever they do. Girls, local girls, were put out so the boys could have their way with them while they're out. I mean, this was... it was kind of normal in some of the places that I've been.
You never leave your drink exposed because the boys see somebody froth at the mouth and slur their speech. They can't stand up, manage their own faculties. It's funny. The story was out that Michael got H-bombed.
What was his role at that point?
Michael Hayes worked at Creative at that point in time. I don't know if he was officially an agent, a coach, a producer. They've gone through several names. They all do the same thing. With the halcyon in his body, and I don't know what else could have been in there. He was not himself, and he made bad decisions.
On the now infamous flight, there were a number of incidents involving WWE management and wrestlers that were later attributed to the heavy drinking on the flight, partially because the flight was delayed for an hour before takeoff. The first incident was Mr. Perfect versus Brock Lesnar, who had a tussle on the plane. Among the incidents included the late Curt Hennig goading Brock Lesnar into a mid-flight wrestling match after ribbing him about who was a better amateur wrestler. Curt Hennig and Brock Lesnar were close friends who travelled together, both hailing from Minnesota. But during the long flight, they got restless, leading to what started as a friendly amateur wrestling-style takedown tussle after Curt insisted he was a better grappler than the younger Brock. Hennig and Lesnar scuffled in the aisle of the plane, with Lesnar taking down Hennig and Hennig being unable to return the favour. As they stumbled about the jet, they hit the latch door of the plane, a situation which could have turned disastrous and even deadly if they hadn't been pulled apart. Eventually, several others on the flight, including Dave Finlay, Triple H and Paul Heyman, had to separate the pair.
Curt, boy, he knows how to rib. He was one of the best ribbers in the business.
Ribs started happening once Curt came back into the company. Curt would always play with Brock.
Brock was sitting in his chair, and Curt Hennig put shaving cream on his head. He went splat and splatted on his head. Next thing I know, Brock is chasing Curt like a full sprint, like wham, wham. Brock went right behind him.
And then Brock just swoops him up. So now you have Brock Lesnar, who's 6'4", and he's picking up Curt Hennig, who's about 6'4".
They went into one row, like a bunch of the guys had to move.
So they would go from one side of the fuselage and then into the other, and the overhead bins got broken, and tables got broken, and armrests got broken off.
Things started to break, yeah, because they're just so big. Like, I do remember one of the seats, like the middle of the seat came completely off.
And as a safety professional, there's not a damn thing I can do to stop these two men. Like, there's not a damn thing I can do to get them to hear my voice. One of the wrestlers had commandeered our PA. So in the middle of the fight going on, we have someone yelling into the airplane, "We're gonna die, we're all gonna die." So here comes one of the pilots to the back of the airplane, trying to get these two men to stop slamming each other against the fuselage. And they wouldn't even listen to him.
One of our illustrious agents said, "You need to come back here." So I go back there, and they're play fighting. It's just they're play fighting in the emergency exit room.
Brock picks Curt up, and then they hit the emergency door. This was a big boom. Everyone jumped up, and we're like, stop, stop.
It was their own teammates that finally got it to stop because they were scared.
I'm not a mechanical engineer. I don't know what all it takes to pop that security door. But I didn't want to find out at 30,000 feet above the air.
You have all these people, could you imagine what happens if that door opened? If you think about it, it's physically impossible to open that door.
They would have no idea of knowing the door couldn't pop out. But they were throwing each other against the fuselage. And if that fuselage breaks, the airplane could depressurize it. Now you're doing an emergency landing. And where are you going to land if you're over the Atlantic? The weight and the size that they are of wrestlers, I mean, they could go through a wall in a house. Why couldn't they go through a wall in an airplane?
Because just the banging, was, Brock is so big.
He was just a thick, solid, big bear is right, man. He was a solid boy, young. He was getting a big push.
Brock Lesnar is an animal.
Brock was very new to the business, and he exposed himself to me at the Insurrection pay-per-view like a real dick. I remember that night I was doing interviews.
And Jackie in a tag team match.
I was backstage, and I hear my name called, and Brock was in this room. Dustin was in the room, my ex-husband at the time. And Brock did the whole thing. I no-sold it, went to my dressing room. Dustin came in, he's like, don't sell it. I'm like, I'm not selling it. I didn't sell it, I'm not gonna. In other words, let it lie, leave it alone.
I had complaints about Brock Lesnar's behavior on the plane. But I don't recall any advances or reported advances from Brock to Terri Runnels. Could it have happened? Of course, it could have happened. It could have happened. I did my job to the best of my ability to look out for the talent. I can't follow everybody around to see if they're acting like an adult. That should not be my job. It really shouldn't.
Now we come to the Goldust and the PA system serenade incident. The wrestling was tame compared to some of the other antics on the flight. Goldust's antics were one of the key points of mayhem when it came to the flight. Due to his intoxicated nature, Rhodes managed to get control of the plane's PA system to start a singing an awkward slurred serenade to his ex-wife Terri Runnels, who was also on the flight, that the then president of talent relations Jim Ross enforced his authority to shut him down. Terri Runnels also made references to other inappropriate things which happened on the flight too.
We got TVs tomorrow, it's like, let's get some rest now. I'm leaning against the window, sleeping, and all of a sudden I hear this very familiar voice. And Dustin, my ex-husband, starts singing a David Allan Coe song called Pledging My Love. Forever, my darling, my love will be true. Always and forever, I'll love only you. I immediately am like mortified. Everyone that's just drifted off to sleep is now woken up by, that's bad. I was about to get up and go back there and tell him to stop. But Paulie was across the aisle and he looked at me, he's like, don't sell it, don't sell it. So I left it alone.
It seems like whenever somebody does something to you, people say, don't sell it.
Because that's just the smartest way to deal with our business. Just don't sell it.
If Dustin could sing, it would have made it a little bit easier. But he couldn't carry a tune in a bucket.
Though I did not like his behavior, I genuinely felt for the guy in the sense he was obviously hurting, That pain was real. No, I don't like to see anyone hurting like that. However, he still should have given me my microphone back.
It got uncomfortable. Like, JR had to stop that. He literally went up to Dustin and said,
sit your ass down. Go to sleep. Give us all a break.
Eventually he passed out. That's how we got our PA back. He fell asleep and I got the microphone from him.
If I was a flight attendant, to be on that flight that night would have been probably one of the worst experiences of my career. Some young ladies just trying to do their job and just trying to get home. I could imagine it being very disheartening for them and scary in some ways, I'm sure.
Now we come to Scott Hall's losing consciousness on the plane. Scott Hall had a well-known history of alcoholism. Although he did not have a match at the pay-per-view, he did interfere in a match and he did perform at the house shows during this UK tour. He was smuggled through the airport sitting on a wheelchair, disguising his unconsciousness for sleep. In addition to pranking other wrestlers with shaving cream, he said sexually vulgar things to Doyle before passing out. Scott Hall didn't last long on the flight before slipping unconscious, although there were reflecting reports about his involvement in the shenanigans. JR himself insisted Hall was not involved with any of the major incidents when he was awake. He seemed to have done enough to put last rites to his ailing WWE career. Aside from the earlier shaving cream antics, it seems some of Hall's contributions to the flight were of a much more sinister nature. In the harassment allegations, attendant Doyle claims Hall slobbered on her face before telling her he wanted to lick her pussy. He told Cappellano to suck his dick. Then he passed out so deeply, in fact, that people had to check his pulse to see if he was still alive.
Let's talk about Scott Hall for a second. What's his state at this point?
Scott's issues have been well documented. He's documented. He had issues with substance abuse. We were not doing him any favors putting him back on the road so he could resume his routines. But we didn't do him justice. But we didn't know how bad it was. And for those that think we should have known, well, we didn't. You don't know until you see it. You interact with it.
We were quite close to landing, and I came to Scott Hall, who had just woken up. I'd offered him breakfast, and he grabbed my shirt and pulled me down, and my shirt buttons got ripped. And he had told me what he was gonna do to me.
Do you remember what he said?
He said a number of things, but what I do remember is as my shirt ripped, he told me he was gonna lick me. And then he proceeded to try to do that, which, I don't want to say scary because that might sound too dramatic, but it was a moment of great violation, discomfort to have a person put their hands on you without you wanting them to do that and to not let go when you ask them to. And to create a level of fear when you're there to do a job and you're doing your job and now you have to be afraid that you're gonna get hurt. It didn't feel to me that he was gonna let go anytime soon. And then he passed out. And I was able to, dislodge him from me.
I think that Curt H-bombed me because I've been taking pills and drinking for a lot of years at that point, and I was out.
After that happened with Scott Hall, I never left the galley. I didn't serve anyone. And they got angry at me for that. They wanted more food and drinks, and I was done. I didn't come out of the galley again.
Now we come to one of the more well-known incidents in regards to this flight, which was Ric Flair faces charges from this flight. Another shocking story to emerge from the flight were allegations of sexual misconduct against Ric Flair, who is said to have been walking around the plane in a robe with nothing on underneath, according to wrestler Justin Credible. The wrestler was accused of exposing himself to a flight attendant, and the claims of which were later to become the subject of a lawsuit. Two flight attendants, Taralyn Cappellano and Heidi Doyle, would compile their allegations into a 2004 lawsuit. Chief among the chronicled misdeeds was Flair's sexual aggression. Apparently he wore nothing but a jeweled cape, the flight attendant said, and flashed his nakedness spinning his male part around. He separately grabbed each woman's hand and placed it on his crotch, and then forcibly detained and restrained Doyle from leaving the back of the galley of the airplane while he sexually assaulted her. Flair would later insist there was no truth to these incidents, though the WWE eventually settled out of court with both women. He also seemed to get away without much backlash initially. However, following the Dark Side of the Ring episode, which focused on the plane ride from hell, Flair was thrown into deep waters and his reputation was put through the ringer. It seemed as though an upcoming deal with AEW was stopped dead due to light being shed on these allegations. In November of 2022, Flair said the claims would be addressed in an upcoming documentary.
There was another situation that occurred with Ric Flair for me that was very uncomfortable.
Sometimes as a joke, Ric Flair would put on his robe, not wear anything else, and walk that aisle like Ric Flair and then open it up and woo.
That's the big high spot. Everyone wanted to see Rick coming out naked in his robe, so he did it on the airplane for everybody. And that's what the guys want to see. That's what makes them laugh.
He could move his hips and twirl it And so his well-endowed penis spins around like a helicopter. So that's, hey, he's the nature boy for a reason. He's got a hammer on him.
He's the life of the party. And if you know him, you know where to exit the party and go to your own safe place, or you don't know the rules and you find yourself in deep water. And that may have happened.
And I was in the galley. The galley is where our little kitchen area on an airplane. Ric Flair was naked in a cape only, and then he decided to come back to the galley to get a Coke. And then he wouldn't leave the galley. He had me back against the back door, and I couldn't move. I couldn't get away from him. I couldn't move. He was spinning around his penis, and he wanted me to touch it, and he took my hand and put it on him.
Ric Flair is not going to try to impose by force any sexual stuff onto anybody. He's just flaunting, styling and profiling, doing like the Ric Flair stuff where everybody's going to laugh about it. But obviously someone took offense to it.
I remember him crowding the flight attendant, like in the aisleway back there by the bathroom where it's like real skinny and you can't fit two people through there and stuff. I remember him like crowding her and trying to make her touch him and stuff.
And he kept me back there for I don't know how long, but it felt like a really long time. It wasn't short, like it was minutes. And I asked him to please stop, and he wouldn't. I don't remember somebody really helping me except for one, I believe Goldust, who had the mic. I do believe he told Ric Flair he should leave me alone eventually. He should leave me alone. And maybe that's why I didn't get as angry about the mic as maybe I should have. I think he did try to help me, and he was the only one that did.
Now we come to the Michael Pierce Hayes losing his mullet. Road agent Michael Hayes was involved in a physical incident with Bradshaw, aka JBL, after heavily drinking, allegedly punching him. Now, this was interesting because after a hard-fought match at the Resurrection pay-per-view, JBL suffered a laceration which was then busted open by Michael Hayes. It's claimed that Hayes punched Layfield while he was sleeping, prompting the latter to strike back and clock Hayes with a knockout punch. Hayes' actions led to someone, later confirmed to be Sheen X-Pac Waltman, cutting off his mullet while he was sleeping, one of the features that made him so recognisable to fans. The consensus at the time was that Hayes deserved it for his part in starting the incident with Bradshaw.
Bradshaw had gotten split open the night of the pay-per-view.
Oh, yes! He is busted open!
As Bradshaw is sleeping, Michael Hayes just knocked him in his head and reopened the wound. So now JBL is bleeding all over his shirt. So JBL slapped him and knocked him out.
He knocked out Michael Hayes. We're like, holy shit. Then I hear like chanting for X-Pac.
X-Pac was one of the sweetest guys in the world. He really is. Jay Strongbow used to call him the traitor hitch because he's always following the big load of Hall and Nash.
I want to know
to get my hands on Austin.
But he wanted to be accepted so badly and perceived as a main event guy.
Michael Hayes had been burying me in the booking meetings, and he's got that ponytail, that mullet. So as he's out cold, I grabbed that tail and I lifted up my tongue. I just went whack.
I remember the big pop. And it was like him holding up the title, but he had the ponytail.
Back in the day, you were not allowed to sleep on those flights. You would end up with a shaved eyebrow. You always had to have one eye open, so to speak, when you're on a plane full of the boys.
I had my hat on, my sunglasses, even though it was nighttime. You had to wear all that stuff because you didn't know who's coming by with shaving cream. If somebody went to lift your shades up, you had a chance of waking up. Or take your hat off, you have a chance of waking up and kicking out real quick.
Now we come to the aftermath of this incident. Jim Ross, in his now defunct Ross report on WWE.com, stated the following about the flight in his first column after the tour. Quote, "The flight was about 7 hours in length and at times was low-lighted by a handful of people who consumed too much alcohol and consequently acted like children whose parents were away and left the liquor cabinet unlocked. The conduct of this inebriated minority was unacceptable and will not be tolerated. Procedures have been put in place to ensure such conduct does not occur in the future. The bottom line is this. Yours truly is the person in charge of the talent roster and the buck stops with me. We will do all we humanely can to solve the problem." End quote. Now we're going to get into what happened to some of the major players. Terri Runnels would remain with the WWE after the event, but stated that she believed that she would have lost her job had she spoken up about some of the incidents which took place during the flight. She would eventually get released in 2004, though this was during a big firing spree from WWE and it wasn't related to the plane situation. Dustin Runnels, on the other hand, was in the doghouse for a long time and was publicly dropped by WWE in late 2003 with a WWE.com statement announcing his contract would not be renewed when it expired in January of 2004. Also not to return, however, was an all-time great and Prometheus Hall of Famer Curt Hennig. He was seemingly held solely accountable for the aircraft door incident with Brock Lesnar, and shortly after Hennig was released from his WWE contract. Sadly, he died the next year. As Hennig and Rhodes' contracts were headed for the shredder, so too was Scott Hall's. His release was announced too just days after, though his poor physical shape during the tour was also cited as a cause for his severance. He would sign shortly after with the then debuting NWA TNA promotion.
The plane was trashed. Blankets, pillows, drinks, cups, food stepped on. A normal flight, they're passing by 3 or 4 times with trash bags and this and that. Well, this wasn't a normal flight, so and I think Scott was passed out. I think they were actually worried he was dead, you know? So they were all stressed, like they got a dead person on this flight now, and like, oh boy, don't worry, he'll kick out. You know, it's like, he'll kick out.
He wouldn't wake up. So I'm picking him up, and I had to get him a wheelchair and literally take him through customs myself. I put the sunglasses on him, laid him there, and he's just kind of, you know. I had to get his passport, had to say that he had some kind of condition. And there I am wheeling Razor through, you know, customs. And there's Jim Ross. He had the black hat on and just looking at me with disgust. And I'm like, I'm here, I'm wheeling him. I didn't do anything.
Once we landed, Michael Hayes woke up and his ponytail was missing. And Michael Hayes was pissed off about it. He was hell-bent to find out who did it. You know who did it, you know who did it. And would have fought the entire plane if he could have.
He was really angry. He was really angry.
And when we landed, we started to pick up the airplane, and there was vomit, and there was blood. There was syringes found in seatback pockets and other places. And I'm going, oh no, we're not cleaning this airplane. We're gonna get off right now. And my superior's saying, no, you need to clean the airplane. And me just walking off the airplane, you know.
That happened on Delta or American or whatever. When we got back to the States, the FBI would have been waiting on us.
There should have been more repercussions for sure. There should have been some, I don't know, they did have repercussions, I learned later, but they were only, I think, because they knew they had to do something, you know, because it didn't look real good for Vince McMahon's organization, I don't think.
For better or for worse, I'm taking ownership. But it was a black eye. Good thing about a black eye, you heal.
I just couldn't believe everything was getting out of control with Vince on the flight, you know, but it did. It got out of control. I don't know. I don't know what Vince was doing during this whole time. I wonder what.
Vince was well aware of it, but it was my job to handle. That's why I'm still embarrassed about it this very day. It was my job to handle.
Vince McMahon makes the decisions, but Jim Ross is the one who has to execute them. Jim Ross is the guy who has to fire you as well. Jim Ross is the guy who has to tell you, hey, you're messing up. He's the guy who has to fine you. that's that position.
It wasn't a tough decision on my part to cut some guys from the roster because it's what Vince McMahon told me to do. And the guy that writes the checks has the last say. I was troubled by Curt's firing. I just thought he had a bad night with the boys. He had a reputation of being kind of a practical joker, and Vince had enough of it.
And you kind of figure maybe, okay, Kurt got fired, but then he's gonna come back and circle his way around at some point, which he would have, I'm sure. But he passed away not too far after that. And Razor, I think it was just his drug addiction that kind of maybe just his career kind of slipped away there.
We let Scott go within hours after we got back to the States. I was told to cut him now. And so I called him at home and, I just said, I think we made a mistake. You're not ready to get back on the road. And until you're better suited to handle your demons, we need to put you back in your comfort zone, which meant at home, primarily. Dustin Rhodes is one of my favorite people in the world. We go back a long way. I don't know if it was just the rebound of his divorce with Terri, what it was, but he was in a tough place. But no excuse. So, he was dipping his snuff and using the seatback cushion as a spit too. I had two options. Fine him, then I'll get his attention, or fire him, which I thought was extreme and did not need to happen. That was my call. He learned from his mistakes. He was immature. He had substance abuse issues. And sometimes he controlled them and sometimes he didn't. But the bottom line is that we have to stop in our society letting others' transgressions go without punishment.
How does it that Ric Flair evaded any sort of suspension or anything like that?
Good question. I guess, lack of a better term, he was a made man. And he was such a high-level made man that he got a pass. Was it the right thing to do? I don't know. You're listening to it, folks. You decide. He got a pass.
I remember walking off the airplane on the tarmac, and we went to a hotel that was quite nearby and talking about how horrible, and the girls from the front saying they didn't know that it was that, that it was that bad. And then I just went to my hotel room and I took a shower and I cried. I called SportsJet. They said that was unfortunate that had occurred on the airplane. They preferred that we kept it to ourselves, the story, because we work with professional athletes and things happen on airplanes. And they let us know it was expected that we would respect the privacy of our clients. So then you have to figure out how you tell your husband, how was your trip? Well, it wasn't excellent. What do you tell your husband? It can even create situations where they say, well, why did that happen to you? Or what did you do to make them do that to you? And I would say that might be the worst question you could ever ask somebody who's been hurt, because you already feel a sense of, what did I do? Did I smile? Was I too nice to him? And made you feel almost like you'd done something wrong when I hadn't. But I know there was another girl on the flight that was very upset about similar things that had occurred to her. She went to a lawyer, and then she contacted me and said I should do that as well.
If I filed a lawsuit for every time something like that happened to me, dear God, I would be in court for all my adult life.
My sense of it was that the company wanted to address this matter, take it off our books, do the right thing by those that had complaints, and then move on.
There was an agreement that was reached, and they offered us a settlement. My husband just didn't want the story told to the public, maybe just to protect our daughter, or him, us, I don't know. So he was very, very supportive of the settlement. It's sad that money has to be that compensation. Like, I think definitely truth and honesty and change is more powerful, but money is what ends up on the table, I think, and then it also buys you silence, which then can add to another layer of the guilt of a victim. Like, it can be a cycle that's not good, yeah, perpetually bad.
If that's how she felt, maybe she should have not taken a payout and went to the fullest extent of the law to then truly put this heinous person in jail. My opinion.
People have their own opinions of what happened, what the damage was, though no one should really have a bad opinion when it didn't happen to them, but they do. They say, you know, well, it wasn't that bad, you're okay, aren't you? And now you have to live with a pain or a memory of something that you didn't bring about, and that takes some work.
We had TV that day, on Monday. Of course, the talents. AJR. What? Did you see what they did to Hayes' ponytail? No, what? Michael Hayes' ponytail was put into a sandwich bag that was taped to the locker room door at Raw on Monday until I saw it. And I took it down, threw it away. Young talents coming in the business after that era had heard all the stories, saw the remnants, saw guys that had made millions of dollars not have two quarters rubbed together. And I think they learned from their predecessors.
Nice job.
It's a different culture. It's a different era. I think that's the upshot, and maybe good news, that incidents like the plane ride from hell smarten some of these younger kids up. I want to be in the wrestling business. I've always idolized this guy, but I do know I'm not going to pattern some of my career after this guy. But you make good choices that way.
I think that there's definitely a sense of that cliche, never meet your heroes. The people who have watched for generations and got them through their lives, I don't think that they all need to see Ric Flair doing the helicopter with his penis. Like, I don't really think it's good for everybody to know this about their heroes, you know? Some of these guys are freaks.
I feel this is trying to portray someone as this sexual predator, and it's not. It's a joke, it's a gag. And today, 1000% inappropriate. My hairstyle is inappropriate right now. I am somehow offending someone right now with my double ponytail. How dare I have two ponytails? And my answer is, I'm 50 years old, I'm happy I have hair. But if you're asking me, I've hung out with Ric Flair. I've never seen him try to force his will against anybody.
I don't feel that his intent was to rape me. But what he did was wrong. It was wrong, and he goes to sleep that night and thinks he made it back from his wrestling trip in Europe, and maybe he has a headache because he had too many cocktails on the airplane. And yet, that night I didn't go to sleep. My trip to work, my trip to get money to support my daughter, becomes a memory that is mine forever to live with. Like, I get to live with the fact that I had to see a naked man and get my face licked by a man that I was there to make sure he got from point A to point B safe. And they went to sleep and thought they made it home safe and sound, and so goes on the world, you know? I was uncomfortable coming to talk about this, because you see some stories get told and then people get ridiculed, or they're everything picked apart as what they did wrong when they're just telling the story. But if one person that listens to this says, oh my gosh, I might have acted like that towards somebody and I didn't even realize I did it. Or if one person hears that they had something happen to them that they didn't like and they didn't feel they could speak about it because they'd get in trouble, or they were made to feel that they created the situation and might have made it happen. Like, if it could change it for one person, I'd sit and have this conversation 25 times again. The truth can be scary, and the truth can be ugly and messy, but at the end of the day, the truth is the thing that makes us better in the end, you know?
With that, this case remains open, but with many unanswered questions that still remain unanswered. Please rate the show and let me know what you guys think about this and the many other cases I've covered. You can follow me on all major social media platforms, YouTube, BitChute, Dailymotion. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. Links are all down below in the description. If you have a case you'd like me to have a look at or cover, don't hesitate to send me a message. I'm your host, and this has been the Unanswered Questions podcast. Until next time. Next on Unanswered Questions. Jack the Ripper was an unidentified serial killer active in the impoverished districts in and around Whitechapel in the East End of London in 1888.